So for this video, what I'm going to do is cover the navigation bar using the Navbar class and the various Navbar classes. So for this, we're using the lesson 3 folder, and then go from in there, go to the 03 lesson inside of the lesson 3 folder. All right, so to begin with in here, we need to start with kind of just reviewing what all your options are in here for the various classes, colors, and so on. So first off, you have these Navbar classes inside of the main container of this Navbar. So you need at least something called a Navbar toggleable and a breakpoint, or the expand, but Navbars will by default stack on top of one another. So the Navbar toggleable plus the breakpoints is going to tell the browser when the item is to stack. So if you say Navbar toggleable, or in this case too, the new updated version has it as Navbar expand, then the small, or SM, of the Navbar will be stacked until it reaches the small breakpoint. In addition to that, you have a number of internal components inside the Navbar. At the very least, you need to use a Navbar nav component. And this is where you would put the links to your navigation. So you can have additional components, but we'll talk about those later. The Navbar classes then, in this case, are Navbar and Navbar expand, or if you have the older version, it's going to be Navbar toggleable. And then you can also have in here the Navbar itself with various color options. So you can set the color options either using the bootstrap classes. So you have your BG color here for backgrounds, and then you have Navbar light. So BG color for backgrounds is primary, and these are exactly what the colors are. So your primary, secondary is this gray, success is green, danger is red, warning is the gold, info light, dark, and white. And then you have Navbar light and Navbar dark. And this is the regular background that we've seen before. You can use any of the keyboards available for that class. In addition to that, you have two options for coloring in the text itself. So that's this Navbar light or Navbar dark. You can see when we use this and go in and use that with the various options, the dark or the light, that you'll notice obviously the difference, whether, of course, if you have black and then you use dark, well, you aren't going to be able to see the text in that, right? So anyway, these are the options that you have for your text. Now you can also, for all of these, go in and stylize these. If you know CSS, you can go in and stylize these with using your CSS just by doing a style, background color is, and then choosing whatever background color you want. Or the same with the text, doing a text color. All right, the next you have various options here. So now the Navbar nav itself has a few options, just like with the nav. You can include a nav item. That would go in the list item or inside the anchor tag, as well as the nav link. That goes in the anchor tag itself. And then in addition to that, we have the active as well as the disabled classes. Active shows, it just kind of highlights it and shows that that's the link that you're currently on. And then disabled is going to be grayed out and is also not going to allow you to be able to click on it and go anywhere. So going to this 0304 file that I had opened up here, go ahead and open up that index.html file, get that open. And of course, as always, make sure you're doing your new site if you're in Dreamweaver, or navigate to the folder if you're using Bootstrap or some other HTML editor to make sure that you're defining that as the root folder And so that all of these then, your JavaScript and your CSS and so on is all going to be linked to that. So that's always your first step in here. All right, so keeping that in mind, what we're going to do is then type in here this class equals and then the navbar, and then we want to add some kind of color here so that you guys can kind of see this process take place and what the purpose of this is. So I'm going to do nav space and then class equals, and in quotes do navbar, because remember we're going to now start using just this navbar, and then we'll set up some kind of a background. So we'll do bg hyphen light to add to that class, and then the class of navbar light. So we're going to say in here navbar light, and as always my fingers are a little goofy, but there you go. So navbar, and then we need a hyphen here in between the R and the L. So it's going to be navbar light, the background's going to be light, and then your class is just the navbar. So I'm kind of clicking off of that so you can see it a little bit better. Your color now, when we click down here, you'll see that this is the class of navbar. This is the appearance that you're going to get. If I collapse this window, you'll see that that is as well going to collapse. Now we're going to go in here and set this up so that we click, or so that when we expand this for, or collapse it for mobile devices and expand it for a computer, for a regular desktop computer, that you're going to see a difference down here in how these are spaced. But right now I want to point out that we do have a reference on here. So you do have your anchor tag, that's the A here. You do have your reference. So in other words, this actually would probably be something like mission.html, not the hashtag here, or index.html for home and so on. But just by putting the hashtag in there, that'll create a link. So that's why all these are highlighted in blue, and when you roll over them, that's the default. You can always change these as you add different styles to it. So you can go in and change it with either the bootstrap styles and the way those are written, or you can change it inside here. All right, so right now what we'll do is, so that we can kind of start getting this contained, because right now this navigation system is sitting here in all kind of out by itself, and thus why it's kind of floating around here and why we don't have a lot of control over it. So what we're going to do is add a div tag that we're going to give it a class of navbar, nav, and then that will start containing this navigation system in here, so that you have this then a little bit more ability, or a lot more ability, to be able to go in and set the various breakpoint properties for your various mobile devices. So again, we'll wrap this in a div tag. Now make sure that you are now under the actual nav tag here, where we have the class of navbar and then bg light and so on. So make sure that you've got that underneath here. But before your links, because it's these links here, these anchor tags here, that we want to wrap inside here, which is all of these, of course, right? So we're going to go ahead in here and give it a div tag. So left caret and then div. And then it's going to have a class, like I said, of, in quotes, navbar, and then hyphen nav. And then make sure you put your caret over here, your right caret, for that tag. So class equals navbar nav. Now, the class of navbar nav, what that does is the default is just this stacking order. Well, if you were on your mobile device, that might be okay. But for a desktop and for your iPad or something, that's probably not okay. So by default, this just stacks as it is. All right, we have now these anchor tags up here that also need kind of a class style to them. So we're going to add a class style of nav-item, so class style of nav item, and a class style of nav link. And that once we do that, then you'll see that your breakpoints are going to appear in here a little more visually appealing as you close and open your browser window there. Sorry, hesitating there. I'm going to select all these at once so that I can do this a little quicker. So I'm selecting them all as I showed you in previous videos. And I'm going to do your class equals, and then in quotes, nav hyphen item. Make sure you spell that right. So nav hyphen item, space for your second class style, and that's going to be nav hyphen link. And then of course we put a quote on the end of that, and that is your links. So or that is your your links, sorry, your navigation bar here. So it's class equals nav hyphen item, and then nav hyphen link, and then you still have your H references and so on over there. All right, so now when I click in here, you'll see that the colors change quite a bit here. They start taking on those properties, as it should, of your navigation up there at the top, the styles that you added to the top. So all right. So let's go in next here. So we have that. Let's go in next here, and I'm just kind of looking at this and reviewing and trying to make sure that I'm telling you everything that I want to be telling you as we kind of walk through this. So let's go in and change the nav class to the following, because I just want to kind of show you some things here as to colors and so on, and how that's going to appear as well. So if we go up here and change this, instead of saying BG light, let's change both of these to dark. So I'll go in here and I'm going to change this BG here to dark. And then I'll go in here, sorry, that flipped up a little bit. I'll go in and change my nav bar to dark. And then when you look at that, you'll see that can't hardly see these because of how dark they are. And, you can't, the background now is, so dark that, again, these properties on here aren't showing really very well. All right, we're going to change those back. We can change kind of the color here for your, instead of the background, if you make this light, now you'll see that, sorry, dark. So I have dark on dark. That's what I want it to be. All right, but when I change this to light, if I go in here one more time and kind of talked through that a little backwards here. But if I go in and change this to light for your text, you'll see that what it's telling it is pretend that it's on, a dark background, or a light a dark background, and then as a result, it turns it to black. Whereas you have this as dark, then you'll see that it appears as your light. So that you're telling it's kind of a little confusing because you're telling it to be dark with your navigation bar, the text, to accompany a dark background. I guess that's the way I can say it, that it would make more sense. All right, Bootstrap is designed so that this mobile first framework, which is what it's kind of designed to do to begin with, so it would happen on a mobile device. So that's why this is happening here, that as I expand it to a desktop computer, that it's still just floating down here. So we have to tell it differently. And that's where that Navbar expand came in that I showed you. I see I don't have them open anymore, but I showed you that there was this Navbar expand. On the older versions, it's Navbar toggleable. And so you would probably enter that instead. But even if on the older versions you add Navbar expand, it'll probably pick that up and read it. So what we want to do is under this div class equals, what we want to add to it is this Navbar expand. And